Ancient Stargates. Stargates are doors or portals that lead to other realms. On Earth, the story goes that stargates are often hidden within the magnetic field, waiting to transport people to faraway places, be it a different universe or a different planet. Of course, there isn't any scientific evidence that supports stargates being real, but there are some examples of potential stargates found on our planet. One such example is near Lake Titicaca in Peru. It's called the Gate of the Gods, and the mysterious archaeological site was first discovered in 1996 by a tourist guide. The gate itself is nothing more than a massive stone door. However, local legends say that it once worked as a portal for heroes to pass through and join with the ancient gods. The door is about 21 feet high and carved into the face of the Hayumarca mountain. Yet another example of a potential stargate is at Lake Michigan. Professor Mark Hawley found a stone formation 40 feet below the surface of the lake in 2007. The stone formation looks something like Stonehenge, only underwater. Some have claimed what Mark found in Lake Michigan is the shattered remains of a prehistoric portal that once led to another world. Finally, a third stargate might be in Sedona, Arizona. Here we have mysterious vortexes that some claim were used in the past to travel between dimensions. Sedona was sacred to the nearby tribes before colonials arrived, but has since lost much of its mystique. But some claim that there are still tunnels and gateways underneath the stone cliffs that can act as portals. And now for another very mysterious location. But first, want to give a big shout out to Vanessa Heslop, who's a new subscriber, and to Lasagna and Wife. Hi guys! Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. The Cabayan Mummy Caves. The Cabayan mummies go by a few different names, such as the Ibaloy mummies and the Benguet mummies, but they are most commonly known as the Philippine fire mummies. The story behind them is nothing short of shocking. Their exact location was kept secret by the government because of robberies in the 1900s. We know where they are today, but they are still so far away from civilization that the only way to get there is to fly to the Philippines, take a 5-hour car ride deep into the mountain villages, then hike until your legs ache deep into the forest. There, you can find Timbak Caves, with the mummies still resting in their original coffins. But what's so fascinating about a few mummies? These are not your typical mummies and far from what you would expect to see in Egypt. Scientists believe they were created sometime between 1200 and 1500 by the mysterious Ibaloy tribe. The process behind the mummification is very unique and took a very long time. After a person died, their body was washed and they were placed in a seated position. Tobacco smoke was then blown into their mouth to dry them from the inside over time. They used salt and herbs and fire to slowly rid the body of fluids with smoke. The entire process could take up to 2 years. The bodies would then finally be placed in a wooden coffin and taken to the cave or placed in a special rock-cut niche. At this site, there are over 200 man-made burial caves, but only 15 mummies have been discovered so far. The practice ended in the 1500s when Spain colonized the Philippines and Christianity spread. Today, this is one of the most endangered sites in the world. It's also one of the hardest to get to, which might also help to preserve the site. Mass sacrifice. Near the coastal town of Huanchaco in Peru, archaeologists made quite a grisly discovery. They were uncovering a site that once belonged to the Chimu people, one of the most powerful civilizations in the area. Excavations revealed a child's skeleton, then another, then another. Everywhere they dug, there was another skeleton. In total, archaeologists found 227 victims between the ages of 5 and 14 years old, and there are more that might still be uncovered. Around 500 years ago, these children were likely sacrificed in some kind of ritual. According to the BBC, this disturbing discovery came less than a year after 2 other archaeological sites in the country were found to contain the bodies of another 200 young victims of human sacrifice. Archaeologists reported that some of the bodies they found were so well preserved they still had their hair and skin when they were dug out of the ground. The children were buried facing the ocean, suggesting they had been sacrificed to appease the gods. The Chimu resided all along the northern coast of Peru and were one of the most powerful civilizations of their time, reaching their peak between 1200 and 1400, just before they were conquered by the Inca, who were then almost immediately conquered by Spanish invaders. The Chimu people worshipped a moon god, which they believed was more powerful than even the sun. which is different from the Inca belief that the sun was the most powerful god. But just like many other South American cultures, the Chimu often practiced mass sacrifice as a way to appease their natural gods such as the moon, sun, and sea. Pyramid of Senusret II. The mud brick pyramid of Lahun in Egypt is opening for the first time to the public. While the pyramid is located only about 60 miles southwest of Cairo, it can almost be confused with a mountain because time and the elements are slowly making it disappear before our eyes. It's often called the disappearing pyramid because it doesn't even really look like one anymore. Right now, this ancient pyramid looks more like a random piece of rock sticking out of the desert. If you were to walk past the pyramid, you might not even think to stop and look. But despite the fact that the Pyramid of Senusret II seems to be slowly fading, it is truly an ancient and mysterious location. Discovered in the 19th century, it wasn't until the 2000s that archaeologists were able to perform serious excavations. Inside, researchers found a collection of mummies and brightly colored coffins. This little-known pyramid dates back to the 12th dynasty of the pharaohs, built during the reign of Senusret II, who ruled Egypt from 1897 BC to 1878 BC. It actually took researchers months to find the entrance into the pyramid back in the 1840s because there was no entrance. The only way into the pyramid was through a corridor, a very narrow entrance shaft found a few yards away from the pyramid underneath the tomb of a mysterious princess. This strange design was likely to keep away gravediggers and tomb raiders. After all, the Egyptians had had a lot of experience at this point creating tombs and pyramids and knew what they were doing. In more recent years, Egyptian officials have performed extensive conservation and preservation work to protect the ancient pyramid, including clearing out rocks and debris from the tunnels and tombs and installing stairs and lights so visitors can come and enjoy it before it is forgotten completely. The neighboring galaxy. An accidental discovery from the Hubble telescope has revealed a new galaxy right beside the Milky Way. The Hubble telescope, which has been orbiting Earth for almost 30 consecutive years, was checking out our cosmic neighborhood, inspecting a globular star cluster named NGC 6752. It's about 13,000 light-years away inside the halo of our own private galaxy. That was when the telescope was photobombed by a totally unknown galaxy right beside us. Star cluster NGC 6752 resides in the constellation Babel, the Peacock. It's the third brightest cluster visible to us after Omega Centauri and 47 Tucanae. Astronomers were trying to hunt down white dwarf stars to age NGC 6752 when they discovered Bedin 1 completely by mistake. It turns out that Bedin 1 is a spheroidal galaxy that's 13 billion years old and has a maximum of several billion stars within it. What's truly fascinating is that our new neighbor only measures about 3,000 light-years at its greatest extent. That's only 1/30th of the diameter of our Milky Way. But it's not our only cosmic neighbor. Scientists have already identified at least 36 dwarf spheroidal galaxies inside of our local group. The local group itself is made up of 54 different galaxies, with the Milky Way being just one. According to the report in Forbes magazine, Bedin 1 is 30 million light-years from us, or 2,300 times as far as the star cluster NGC 6752. Chinese votive sword. In 2014, a discovery in the state of Georgia in the United States might change the way we look at the past. An explorer was out and about and spotted a small, partially exposed sword on the bank of a small stream. It was a Chinese votive sword just about 1 foot long. Votive swords are not meant to fight, but express a religious vow or a wish. The sword was analyzed, and experts identified it as being made from lizardite, a type of green stone found all over the world. Hopefully, further analysis will show exactly which deposit the material came from, allowing experts to verify if the artifact really did come from China. The sword is just one more example of out-of-place Chinese artifacts that indicate the Chinese may have arrived to America before anyone else. Of course, that includes Christopher Columbus. While it's hard to determine its age just from the context, there are other clues as to its origin. Symbols and shapes on the sword have also been found on jade objects dating from between 2070 and 256 BC, throughout the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. There is a dragon figure at the tip of the blade that is inarguably Chinese. There is also a face mask on the handle of the sword that first appeared sometime between 3,400 and 2,250 BC from the Liangzhu culture. If the sword is indeed thousands of years old, scientists have no idea how it could have gotten to Georgia. Nobody knows if it was brought by Chinese explorers or simply left in the mud by a trader in more recent times who had procured it from overseas. Some people have made connections between the Chinese and the Olmecs, comparing the mythology and symbolism of both. Jade was extremely important to both cultures, and there are also similarities between Olmec and Chinese art. Perhaps the sword was exchanged and spread via ancient trade routes throughout Central and North America. There's no way to know for sure yet if the ancient Chinese actually went to Georgia. Mysterious ancient Stargate. There is a place in Sri Lanka that is steeped in mystery. Known as Rajarata, or the Land of Kings, it is a complex that is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but there are rumors it could be a Stargate. Located in Anuradhapura, it's a mysterious place with hidden secrets. Many say the area is often visited by unidentified flying objects. Others claim there are paranormal happenings around the location that have never been explained. The ruins here were originally established back in 377 BC. The area is littered with ancient Buddhist temples and old stupas, and is very famous for its architecture. But one of the strangest parts of the archaeological site is a map known locally as Sakwala Chakraya, which translates roughly to universe cycle. The map is carved on the face of a rock and is said to be some kind of magical guide map that can unlock the secrets of the universe. The only issue is that archaeologists and historians don't understand how the map works, or even how to read it. Nobody does. Based on everything we know, the carving was probably made fairly recently in the 7th century AD. However, because the Buddhist monks in the area kept no written records, there is no explanation for what the map could possibly mean, or how it's supposed to be read. Some claim that the entire ancient city acts as some kind of a Stargate that can transport human beings to another plane of existence or another world. But of course, nobody can figure out how it works. The mysterious royal tomb. Archaeologists are very excited about a historical site in Turkey that has revealed a mysterious royal tomb and some massive stone gates. Brian Rose and his archaeological team in Gordion began excavations hoping to find the remains of a king. What they found instead was quite the surprise. When they opened the tomb, they discovered a young woman who had died in her 20s, along with an 8-year-old child and a collection of over 600 amber beads. These probably came to Turkey from over 1,500 miles away. As for the site of Gordion itself, it includes 9 settlements and has over 4,000 years of ancient history. It was once the capital of the kingdom of Phrygia. This ancient kingdom might not sound familiar, but you have probably at least heard of one of its kings, King Midas, the one with the golden touch. Gordion is famous for its monumental citadel mound that's about 55 feet tall and lies in the middle of the ancient city that was once surrounded by stone and mud brick fortifications. Excavations have been going on here for about 75 years, but there is still much more to be uncovered. New blue. A few years ago, a group of chemists accidentally created a unique blue pigment for the first time in over 200 years. If this sounds silly, it's really not. These chemists basically cooked up a new color, a unique brilliant blue that they nicknamed Yinmin. It took 10 years for it to be approved for commercial use by the U.S. Toxic Substances Control Act. In 2020, the new and accidental pigment finally became available to art suppliers and is currently one of the rarest colors of paint in the world. One shop was reported to be selling the new blue at $179.40 for 40 milliliters. That's less volume than a shot of tequila. This new blue color is so special that Crayola announced in 2017 that they would replace their retired dandelion yellow color with a new crayon inspired by the color of Yinmin blue, though they couldn't actually afford to use the real pigment. The pigment was made by scientists at Oregon State University while they were investigating materials to be used in electronic applications. Graduate student Andrew Smith was trying to make a type of electronic material by heating manganese oxide to 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit when he noticed a strange blue compound had suddenly appeared in the furnace. Besides this amazing color it makes, it is a very stable compound that doesn't react when heated or cooled, or mixed with water or acid. Surprisingly, other blues cause problems. Cobalt blue is known to be carcinogenic, and Prussian blue can release cyanide. but this new blue appears to be safe. Since the happy accident occurred, the team has now made other durable colors such as yellow, orange, green, and purple by using similar chemistry. They are now on the lookout to make a safe and durable red pigment. Sanchi. The Great Stupa at Sanchi is one of the most mysterious and amazing archaeological sites in all of India. It was founded many thousands of years ago by Emperor Ashoka. And even though it has been standing for so many centuries, it still boasts some of the most impressive Buddhist artwork found anywhere on the planet. Each gateway of the stupa has a pair of square pillars set with lions, elephants, and dwarfs. Starting in the 3rd century BC, Sanchi became the center of the Buddhist faith in the region. It began as a building of brick and mortar, but through the years, more and more was added until it became the impressive structure that it is today, with the gateways not being added until the 1st century BC. But what exactly does this mysterious structure represent? The body of the stupa apparently symbolizes the cosmos as a mountain. We know that many of the depictions are of Buddha, such as the horse without a rider, the umbrella over the throne, and the footprints. And still, much of this ancient place remains a mystery. Eerie Remains in Pompeii. Archaeologists working in Pompeii uncovered more remains of 2 men who died in the volcanic eruption that decimated the city in the year 79. Judging by the positions of the bodies, they were probably trying to leave the area during a brief gap between the first explosion and the second. The first explosion was actually pretty mild. The volcano erupted and a small quantity of ash fell into the city. But as people tried to run, the second explosion came that engulfed and pulverized everything in its path. One of the skeletons discovered here has been identified as a male between the age of 18 and 25. Research on his skeleton showed that he had worked doing heavy labor most of his life. This second skeleton belonged to a man in his 30s or his 40s, dressed in better clothing. Traces of a warm woolen cloak were found beneath his neck. The suggestion is that the older man belonged to a higher class and the younger man may have been his slave. Their remains were even found in the hallway of a rather lavish villa. Researchers created a cast using the impressions the victims' bodies had made in the hardened ash. They died due to thermal shock, with their feet and hands clenched. Excavations at Pompeii are still ongoing, with many interesting and eerie discoveries being unearthed, such as a victim's brain that turned to glass and a horse with his rider. The Pyramids of Sudan. Located along the east bank of the Nile River, 150 miles from the capital of Sudan, there are about 200 pyramids, significantly more than what you would find outside of Cairo in Egypt. However, the ancient pyramids discovered here are mostly in ruins, being swallowed by the desert and ignored by archaeologists and tourists. They were constructed by the rulers of the Kushite kingdoms when this area of the Nile Valley was called Nubia. The first capital was built at Kerma in 2500 BC, and the pyramids here were inspired by the Egyptian pyramids. The Nubian kings built their own pyramids several thousand years later, with the first being constructed in 700 BC. The Nubian pyramids are smaller, painted black, and much pointier. But there are still twice as many Nubian pyramids standing today as there are Egyptian pyramids. The Nubian pyramids were discovered by foreign explorers in the early 1800s. An Italian treasure hunter named Giuseppe Ferlini showed up in the 1830s and demolished 40 of the pyramids at Meroe searching for treasure. And he found it too. Hoards of jewelry, gold, and silver. More pyramids were discovered throughout the early 1900s by archaeologists. And some of the newest pyramids were found during excavations between 2009 and 2012 near a village named Sadenga. There were 80 pyramids here total, built in the 1st century BC. But who knows if there are others waiting to be found. Prehistoric Telephone. When you hear of a telephone, you probably think it's a modern invention. But what if I told you an ancient telephone was found that dates back over 1,000 years? Sounds almost like a hoax, right? A very real marvel from an ancient society in South America was recently discovered by archaeologists, who claim it may be the first telephone ever invented. The invention in question was reportedly found inside the famous Chan Chan ruins of Peru. According to experts, it is the oldest known communication device and the earliest physical evidence of telephone technology anywhere in the Americas. But who built this telephone and why? It was an unbelievable innovation that came from the coastal Chimu people who once ruled the Rio Moche Valley in the north of Peru. These people actually predate the Inca and may have been even more advanced than the builders of Machu Picchu. After all, they did invent the telephone. How was it made? It's almost like an old string telephone, but instead of tin cans connected by a string, the Chimu device was built out of two gourd tops and a long length of cord. The gourds acted as transmitters and receivers, while the cord, which stretched over 75 feet and was made of cotton twine, worked to send the voice from one end to the other. Even more fascinating is that according to the curator of the National Museum of the American Indian, this is the only telephone or communication device that has been found at the site. Did they have more? Was this common, or was this a one-time thing? It's incredible to think that the Chimu people created the telephone because historians used to think they were not that advanced since they didn't have a written language. Turns out, they had a lot more going on. Storage Unit Jackpot. Art dealer David Killen recently purchased a collection of abandoned artworks from a storage unit in New Jersey and made an incredible accidental discovery. This New York art dealer purchased the contents of the abandoned storage unit for $15,000. But these things are always a mystery. You buy the unit, but you don't know what's in there. Most of the time, it's a bunch of junk. When he made the purchase, he wasn't sure he'd ever get his money back. Little did he know, there were 6 unknown paintings by famous artist Willem de Kooning. The unit also contained unclaimed work from an art conservator named Orrin Riley, who died in 1986. When David purchased the 200 seemingly worthless art pieces, he thought they would be minor works by minor artists. He was actually planning to use them as filler in his gallery. Happily for David, this storage unit really paid off. The former assistant to Willem de Kooning told the New York Post that he believes the 6 paintings are definitely authentic, probably from the 1970s. This is big news considering a small painting by Kooning recently sold for over $4.2 million at auction. But the total auction record for Kooning stands currently at $66.3 million. This means that if the paintings are authenticated and David puts them up for sale, his accidental discovery could net him millions and millions of dollars. That would be a very lucrative investment on his part. Have you ever found anything cool in storage? Maybe your grandmother's attic or something? Let me know in the comments below. Mass cannibal site. In Germany, archaeologists found evidence of one of the most brutal places from the Neolithic period. They found what is now believed to be a human burial site used by cannibals. The site dates back 7,000 years. According to the BBC, at least 500 human remains were found here, and almost all of them were cannibalized. This includes the bones of children, all of which had been intentionally mutilated. The bones had been deliberately cut and broken, which is a sure sign of cannibalism. Bruno Bolestein from the University of Bordeaux says that they also found evidence that the people buried here had been spit roasted and cooked. But here's where science gets a little strange. Many mainstream scientists have rejected the notion that these people were cannibals. Instead, they said flesh and bone were ripped asunder as part of a burial ritual. But this doesn't really make sense, as doctors who investigated the remains literally said that many of them had been chewed. Unless the burial ritual involves chewing on dead people, chances are we're dealing with what's left of an ancient Neolithic tribe of cannibals who feasted on their very own people. Or perhaps rival tribes? We don't really know the social structure or relations of these ancient humans. Probably the main reason people decided to eat each other thousands of years ago was famine. During food shortages, our very early ancestors resorted to eating one another to stay alive. In the case of the German mass burial, it looks like they feasted on an entire village. Real UFOs. On October 19, 2017, a telescope on the island of Maui made one of the most shocking discoveries in space. It spotted a strange object flying through the sky. At first, the object was believed to be some kind of space rock in our solar system, coming from very far away. It was named Oumuamua, which means first scout from a distant place. It wasn't discovered until it was already heading out of our solar system after making its way around the sun. Scientists were able to deduce that the mysterious object had come from the direction of the star Vega. Nobody ever managed to snap a picture of the object. Astrophysicists had to estimate its size by looking at its brightness. They figured the object was about 1/4 of a mile across and 10 times bigger lengthwise. It basically looked like a rocky cigar or a submarine. Astronomers then concluded that the object was some type of space rock that had been flung into our solar system, made a bit of a turn, and then kept on going. But here's the deal. Everyone wants to know if this thing really was just a rock, or if it was a passing piece of alien technology taking a shortcut through our backyard. Sure, space objects can sometimes accelerate in strange ways because of evaporating gases from their surface. Was it a comet? It moved like one, but it didn't have the classic tail of one. And scientists detected absolutely no evaporating gases. According to the New York Times, some cosmic theorists claim that the object acted a bit more like a light sail, a type of material that propels itself with power from sunlight and starlight, which means the object was more of a vessel than a rock. As time goes by, Oumuamua gets more and more mysterious. What was this interstellar object? How was it accelerating? Was it a natural phenomenon? Alien technology? It is the first object ever seen flying into the solar system and back out again, and we still are no closer to knowing what it was. Man's best friend. Archaeologists have recently discovered the first image ever created of dogs being friends with humans in the Arabian desert. It is a cave painting that shows a hunter drawing his bow while surrounded by a pack of dogs. Some of the canines even appear to have leashes tied to the man's belt. What makes this really fascinating is that according to Science magazine, the image was made over 8,000 years ago. This would suggest that humans figured out how to train and control dogs thousands of years before previously thought. Melinda Zeder with the Smithsonian Institution National Museum of Natural History has said that the cave drawing is the early indication that we currently have that early humans really did use dogs to hunt. Of course, more research will need to be done to prove the theory, but right now it looks like humans and dogs have been friends for much longer than anyone could have imagined. Do you have a close bond with your dog? What kind of dog do you have? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 6. But first, want to give a big shout out to Francisco Costa and Cuchi N. Thanks so much for supporting Origins Explained. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you're new here and join the family. Painted bones. The bones of a mysterious woman have been discovered in Ukraine. The discovery comes from the Dniester River, where there are dozens of burial mounds bursting with the skeletons of ancient humans. One of the most recently discovered skeletons to be excavated is that of a woman who appeared to have her bones painted after she died over 4,500 years ago. The truth of why her bones were painted is something of an archaeological mystery. It all started when archaeologists in Ukraine excavated 61 people from 4 underground necropolises. The oldest tomb goes back about 5,500 years. The team of archaeologists were investigating the area to see if it was an important location for cultural exchange throughout the centuries. What they found was that most of the skeletons could be traced back to the Yamnaya culture, also sometimes known as the pit culture, because they were so fond of burying people inside large pits. Not much is known about the Yamnaya culture. This is why archaeologists were taking such a close look at the bones. They were trying to analyze them to learn more about their lives. And that was when they came across the painted bones of the mysterious woman. It was the first such instance researchers had seen such decoration on human remains from this specific culture. It is now believed that she was likely a very important member of the community. At some point, her tomb had been reopened. Someone decorated her bones and painted them, then they sealed her tomb back up. But right now, researchers can't understand why. The Colossus of Ramseys II. Archaeologists working in Egypt recently discovered a giant statue submerged underneath groundwater inside of a slum in Cairo completely by accident. The experts are saying the statue probably depicts the ancient pharaoh Ramses II, who reigned over Egypt 3,000 years ago. The random discovery has been praised by the Egyptian Antiquities Ministry as one of the most important in recent memory. The statue was found near the ruins of Ramses II's broken temple in the old city of Heliopolis, on the outskirts of Cairo. Ramses II was one of the most powerful rulers of the ancient Egyptian kingdom. He ruled from between 1279 and 1213 BC and led several successful military expeditions, including marching the Egyptian army into Nubia and Syria. So far, the researchers have discovered the head and torso. News crews and curious locals looked on as archaeologists pulled the enormous head out of the water using a forklift. And nearby, the team found a limestone statue depicting Ramses II's grandson, Pharaoh Seti II. The main reason archaeologists are positive that the statue depicts Ramses II is that the Sun Temple in Heliopolis was founded by the man himself. At the time, it was one of the largest temples in the entire nation. The Sun Temple in Heliopolis was nearly double the size of the famous Karnak Temple in Luxor, but like many ancient wonders, it was destroyed during the Greco-Roman occupation of Egypt. Most of its obelisks were moved, Many of the goods were stolen and taken to Europe, and many of the building's supplies were scrapped and reused to help build Cairo. The Tower Tomb. In Bulgaria, there is a massive tower tomb not unlike the enormous tombs found in places like Petra and Palmyra, and researchers believe it probably belonged to the Roman Emperor Philip I the Arab, who was named such because he had been born in Arabia. The huge building comes from the 3rd century AD. It was only exposed in 2018 after archaeologists dug underneath the largest ancient burial mound in Bulgaria. Digging beneath the Thracian mound revealed the broken remnants of the Tower Tomb. Keep in mind that all of these structures were buried and then lost deep underground for a long time. Archaeologists still haven't uncovered all of the Tower Tomb, though they say it could be well over 60 feet in height. What makes the tomb so exceptional is that it didn't come from the ancient Thracians. They built more primitive things out of stone and dirt. Plus, Philip the Arab was betrayed and murdered at the Battle of Verona. It makes sense that he wouldn't be buried in a proper Roman plot, so maybe he was buried here, only to have the Thracians cover up his burial with one of their own, like many civilizations before, kind of like how the Spanish built churches over the bones of the Aztec temples. Lost Village. A lost village over 700 years old was recently found on the side of a highway in England. Exactly 4 buildings from back in the medieval days were found next to the shoulder of the M74 motorway. So far, it's unclear what exactly the buildings had been used for. Archaeologists have found a few artifacts buried along with them, including an ancient iron dagger that may have been used as a talisman to protect the buildings from some kind of evil magic. There was also a whetstone, a spindle whorl, and a couple of coins from the 17th century found buried in the dirt. And considering how close these artifacts were to the highway, chances are that even more incredible relics are waiting to be found, but might be buried under the asphalt. Regarding the iron dagger, according to Natasha Ferguson, an archaeologist working closely with the project, it was discovered underneath the foundation level of one of the houses. And this was a practice often done in medieval England to safeguard a specific building and its inhabitants from both magical harm and worldly harm. But of course, we don't know if the talisman ever worked in the end. The Temple of Zeus. New archaeological discoveries in Syria have unveiled secrets about an ancient temple dedicated to the god Zeus. Excavations in Qanawat were done with the help of the Sweda Antiquities Department, who picked apart the ancient temple to find small rooms, doorways, and a curious water channel that brought water flowing through the building. So far, only the eastern part of the temple has been fully excavated, so there could still be more impressive relics just waiting to be discovered. The Temple of Zeus was originally built by the Greeks and dates back to the 1st century BC. Qanawat was known as Canatha by the ancient Romans, and it was a member of the Decapolis League of Trading Cities. At the time, it was extremely wealthy and powerful, demonstrated by the abundance of ruins here. The Temple of Zeus was just one building inside a great city of temples and megastructures. There is also a temple nearby built in the 2nd century dedicated to the sun god Helios. These were both impressive monuments back in their day, but are currently nothing more than a few stones and a handful of crumbling columns. The city thrived until the Muslim-Arab conquest. Then it began to disintegrate, and today it is now considered a poor village. Students and the local Department of Antiquities are hoping to uncover more before everything is destroyed. Inca Cemetery. At an ancient Inca cemetery in Ecuador, some very strange and mysterious artifacts have been found. It all began when workers started building an irrigation water tank. But almost immediately after the digging started, builders found ancient human remains. An archaeological team was brought in, and they revealed that they were skeletons of people who lived about 500 years ago. But along with the skeletons were strange artifacts that have led to more questions than answers. The ancient Inca cemetery was found in the rural district of Mulalo. A total of 12 skeletons belonging to both adults and children were taken from the graves. But according to Esteban Acosta, the archaeologist in charge of the excavations, the teeth of the dead were in shockingly good condition. Genetic analysis of the teeth will soon tell researchers if the people buried here were all related as a family unit. Right now, everyone is pretty sure these remains belong to ancient Inca people. This is because of the classic Inca pottery found within the graves. But some of the ceramics stand out because of strange symbols drawn on them. Some of them have giant W letters drawn, and researchers don't know why. They don't know if it signifies a name or a place, or if it's just decorative. Another mysterious artifact was a ring found on one of the skeletons that archaeologists say isn't made out of any known metal and doesn't appear to be associated with the Inca culture at all. Nobody can say what the ring signifies or where it even came from. And now for an enormous giant. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Becca and Victor Adeyemo. Thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Origins Explained family. Fossilized vampire squid. An expert team of paleontologists working in Prague discovered a mysterious remnant from a lost time in the ocean's history. They surprisingly came across a fossil of a vampire squid that dates back 30 million years. What's really crazy is that vampire squid still exist today. They are a crimson color and have webbing that attaches all of their appendages, making them look like squid vampires and red gapes. The team made the discovery while combing through an old fossil collection at the Hungarian National History Museum. They came upon an old imprint of a fossil found in 1942 by a Hungarian paleontologist. He had discovered the vampire squid, cataloged the find, and then everyone had forgotten about it. Because the vampire squid was found free of microfossils, experts today know that the animal was definitely living in deep waters. This is important because it shows that the vampire squid had already evolved and was thriving in deep oceans between 34 and 23 million years ago. Scientists still don't know exactly when the vampire squid first evolved to live in the ocean, but they believe they made their way from shallower waters into the depths of the world's oceans around 150 million years ago, which explains how they managed to avoid ever going extinct. Neolithic Orkney. Orkney is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the whole world. Orkney is a region and not a single site, though it is a dramatic landscape populated by stone circles, ancient burial cairns, the ruins of primitive villages, and archaeological riches beyond imagination. It is the heartland of Neolithic Great Britain, with one of the most amazing places being the Nest of Bradar. The Nest of Bradar is a temple complex built with shocking sophistication, and according to Nick Card from the Orkney Research Center for Archaeology, it has no equal anywhere in Western Europe. For years, researchers simply thought that this was a hill. It wasn't until just recently that they realized the hill is actually man-made, and that it was perhaps one of the most immense complexes ever made in Neolithic Great Britain, spanning an area of over 6 acres. The Nest of Bradar was once protected by walls over 300 feet long. There were dozens of temples here, outhouses, kitchens, paved boulevards of stone, and so much more. Archaeologists have found the bones of sacrificed animals and shards of elegant pottery. And yet, despite everything they know, the purpose of this enormous complex is still an enigma that scientists can't seem to solve. Some parts were constructed at least 5,000 years ago, making the Nest of Bradar older and way larger than Stonehenge. But why it was built and what the Neolithic people did there is an absolute mystery. Horror on the Titanic. In 2019, explorers dove down to the wreckage of the Titanic to see what they could find. Afterward, there were headlines all over the internet about divers making a shocking and even bone-chilling discovery inside the wreckage. But what exactly did the divers find on the Titanic that earned such fantastic headlines? The bold truth is that the only thing the divers discovered is that the Titanic is deteriorating at an extremely accelerated pace. The truly shocking part is just what the Titanic actually looks like today, as opposed to when it sank on its maiden voyage back in 1912, killing over 1,500 people. Then again, that's exactly what 100 years under the ocean in the frigid waters off the coast of Canada will do to you. According to the BBC, there were 5 dives done inside of a submersible. Experts witnessed microbes living on the shipwreck, literally feasting on the iron itself, and creating strange rustic structures that make the ship look especially haunted. These structures are so fragile that they will burst into dust if disturbed. It's believed that in just another handful of years, the Titanic will have been reduced to almost nothing. Mysterious jade figure. A mysterious jade cylinder was recently recovered from a cemetery that has archaeologists baffled. The cemetery was built for elite members of an ancient Neolithic society that flourished in China during the 3rd century BC. The spectacular jade relic may hold the secrets of one of the earliest societies to ever live in China. It depicts some kind of humanoid figure with an elaborate headdress riding on the back of a horrifying monster with claws and bulging eyes. The identity of the humanoid is currently unknown, and nobody can quite figure out what kind of monster it is. It could be a shaman or a god, or he could be riding some kind of early rendition of a dragon. The Jade artifact is currently sitting in the Zhejiang Provincial Museum. It was found at the site of Langzhou and predates the earliest known Chinese dynasty of the Shang, who ruled during the Bronze Age in the 2nd century. Judging by this artifact and other pieces found here, including ceremonial axes and wine vessels, archaeologists are convinced that whoever crafted these artifacts prospered at least 1700 years before the Shang dynasty and were far more sophisticated. And yet there is almost no trace of them remaining. Archaeologists found proof of huge rice paddies, old fortifications, and a system of earth walls and moats. But other than the strange artifacts depicting even stranger monsters and humanoids, they really left no clues behind as to who they were or what they believed in. The English Giant. There is an English giant etched into the side of a hilltop in England. This isn't a new discovery, as the Cerne Abbas giant, as he's called, has been around for a very long time, and all the locals know he's there. However, new information from archaeologists is suggesting that the giant figure who has been dominating the English countryside and Dorset for centuries may have been based on an ancient and very naked god. Until recently, experts thought the giant was drawn in the Roman days, probably between the year 43 and 410. But recent evidence says the giant was actually carved much more recently, probably in the 10th century. The reason nobody can quite agree on this is that there is no reference to the giant being around until 1694. That means that somehow either nobody noticed the giant on the side of the hill for nearly 700 years, or nobody thought it was an important enough thing to write down. Thanks to new technology, researchers managed to properly date the chalk used to draw the giant by taking samples and analyzing them with a technique known as optically stimulated luminescence. That's how they got the giant dated to around the 10th century. And as for the large naked god part, he was probably a depiction of a mysterious god named Helith, whom the ancient Anglo-Saxons in the region once worshipped. Classic Car Mania. An urban explorer came across the find of a lifetime when he discovered a rare and very valuable collection of vintage prototype cars that had been estimated to be worth upwards of $1 million. The urban explorer identified himself only as Ben, and he'd apparently known about the secret complex full of unknown treasures for years before he and a friend decided to make their way into the property and see what was in store. What they found was a prototype Bristol Bullet, a Bentley Continental Flying Spur, and even a 1957 Beardmore taxi. All of this stuff hidden inside of a turreted complex with boarded-up windows and unkempt, overgrown grounds. The explorers had no idea they would find such valuable vehicles. The Bristol Bullet was designed as a 70th anniversary prototype model but was never sold and is worth at least $250,000. The 2008 Bentley Continental Flying Spur is worth around $20,000, while the 1964 Bristol 409 Bullet Speedster goes for around $300,000. The Speedster was crafted as a testing prototype and never made it to market. According to Ben, the explorer who found all this stuff, he had no idea what he was getting into when he and his friend broke into the building. They thought it was just an ordinary abandoned warehouse, maybe with a few ghosts and a bit of junk. The building was owned by Bristol Cars, the last independent British car manufacturer in the entire country. They went bust during the COVID lockdown and must have left behind some treasures by accident. And now for number 4, but first, it's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to Reese Watts and Jade Ars. Thanks so much for joining us, and if you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We have tons more videos about new discoveries coming up. Ancient Slovakian treasure. Archaeologists have discovered a secret cache of mysterious silver coins hidden beneath the floor of a Slovakian church. The archaeologists were local, and they found 500 silver coins, with the oldest of them dating back to 1702. What's really mysterious is that they were found underneath the floor of the church, as if someone stashed them there to come back. They were only uncovered because construction workers had been called in to do some renovations. The coins were hidden inside of a seemingly normal ceramic jug, which had been concealed beneath a stone in the original floor of the church, as well as the top of the jug being concealed with a stone. It's not clear how much these coins would have been worth back in the 19th century. It's safe to say that considering each silver coin was wrapped individually in linen, they were probably worth a fortune. They may have even been collected by the church as donations from pilgrims, then hoarded and buried, never to be spent. But this may have actually been a good thing since the church was raided and pillaged in 1705. Obviously, the hidden jug of coins was never discovered by the robbers. Even when the church went through a reconstruction in the middle of the 19th century, nobody found the coins. The Holy Lance. The discovery of the Holy Lance happened a very long time ago. It was June 15, 1098, when the army of the First Crusade came upon this holiest of artifacts. What is the Holy Lance, you ask? It's allegedly the exact same spear that was used to stab into the side of Jesus Christ while he hung on the cross. The lance was discovered while the Crusaders headed through Syria on their way into West Jerusalem. They captured the city of Antioch only to be besieged by a powerful Arab force. Food ran out, morale plummeted, and things were looking pretty grim. But then a peasant by the name of Peter Bartholomew claimed that he saw a vision in which St. Andrew revealed to him the location of the Holy Lance. It was hidden inside the Cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch, right under their noses. Workmen dug deep into the church floor and came out with the sacred lance, and this gave the men the power they needed to defeat the attacking Arabs. But where is the lance now? That's the mysterious part. Nobody has ever authenticated any aspect of the Holy Lance story, even though a piece of the relic is said to currently be hidden underneath St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, ever since it was given to Pope Innocent VIII back in 1492, after the Turks overran Constantinople. To this day, nobody has seen the Holy Lance with their own eyes. Ancient graffiti. There is an ancient settlement in India called Kiladi. A recent discovery could just change history by revealing that this settlement might be 300 years older than previously thought. Experts have found a unique script inside the settlement dating back to the 6th century BC. To understand why this is important, it's critical to know that after the first ever urban society in India declined, known as the Indus Valley Civilization, it's generally believed that the second wave of urbanization occurred in the Gangetic Plains. But with the revelation of this new script, the second wave of urbanization, which eventually led to the prosperous societies of the Indian subcontinent, started in Kiladi. The old dates don't align anymore. Organic material on 6 samples were sent to a lab in Florida, which then used accelerometer mass spectrometry to date the deposits between the 6th century BC and the 1st century AD. Archaeologists identified 56 pottery shards with markings thought to resemble the Tamil Brahmi script, a precursor for the Tamil script used in India today. They also found hundreds of graffiti markings and symbols that look like the evolution of the Tamil Brahmi script, all of which proves that the script is older than commonly believed. Ancient graffiti is changing history. Archaeologists also discovered ornaments of gold, gems, agricultural activity, walls made of brick, and houses with surprisingly advanced designs. The evidence shows an extremely early culture that survived on the barter system without money. Basically, ancient Kiladi had been in the pre-stages of society and is one of the first to be prosperous in India. Hoard of Japanese scrolls. In Japan, experts have made a startling discovery inside of a Buddhist statue. Researchers working with the Nara National University investigated 180 artifacts that were taken from inside a rather small statuette, normally kept inside the Hokeji Temple in Nara, the ancient Japanese capital. Most of the artifacts are scrolls, with some found inside of the statue's body and some found inside its head. They seem to have been stashed inside the statue for safekeeping and then forgotten. Not even the main priest at the temple today had any idea the statue was hiding such interesting treasures. The temple was built back in the 8th century at a time when Buddhism was getting more popular in East Asia. At the time, Nara was a center for Buddhist activity. The statue is actually the figure of Monju Bosatsu, a kind of mythical person who didn't want to go to nirvana and decided to stay on Earth to help humanity in their suffering. The statue is about 700 years old. The reason researchers were so suspicious of it is because back in those days, it was actually quite common to hide artifacts and scrolls inside of statues, and sometimes even mummified bodies. The team had to use CT scans to look deep inside the statue, at which point they saw the hollow space bursting with scrolls. But unfortunately, the scrolls haven't actually been taken out of the statue. Researchers can't figure out how the scrolls got into the statue in the first place, and they can't figure out how to get them out without breaking it. This means it's pretty unlikely that we'll ever know what was written on the scrolls, seeing as there appears to be no way to get them out. Yet. Antarctic Sponges. The discovery of Arctic sponges underneath the ice shelf in Antarctica has scientists pretty confused. These Arctic sponges are strange life forms that were found totally by accident on a boulder beneath the ice. The area that floats beneath the Antarctic ice shelves is one of the least known habitats on our planet. The only way to see what's happening beneath the ice is to drill a massive borehole and lower in a camera. Researchers were drilling almost 3,000 feet through the ice and found life forms attached to rocks, living in utter darkness thousands of feet beneath solid ice in sub-zero temperatures. How had these creatures managed to survive? While they are not exactly fish or lobsters, sponges are filter feeders that don't really move around, making it even more surprising that they are getting enough nutrients to survive down there. According to marine biologist Hugh Griffiths, it was a genuine surprise to discover animals living in such an extreme location. This is because things like sponges were previously thought unable to live in a place so far from sunlight with absolutely no obvious source of food. But clearly that's not the case. The sponges discovered have probably adapted to living in these harsh conditions through thousands of years of evolution and are likely able to live for a long time without having to eat. However, scientists and biologists alike are still boggled by how exactly any life form can thrive encased in ice. Katka Darband. Katka Darband is located in Iraq in the Kurdistan province. It was recently investigated by archaeologists who concluded that this ancient place may have originally been founded by Alexander the Great, or at least during his reign, before being ultimately lost to the world for over 2,000 years. Archaeologists found traces of a fortified settlement previously unknown. They don't know exactly how large the city was or how long it took to build, or even exactly when it was abandoned. What they do know is that judging by the general age of the ruins, the city was probably founded shortly after Alexander the Great defeated the Persian king Darius III. In the local Kurdish language, Katka Darband translates roughly to Castle of the Mountain Pass. It was likely a city rich in wine, profiting heavily from selling to the soldiers and merchants who moved between what is now modern Iraq and modern Iran. The archaeological site was only found in the 1960s because of satellite images taken by the United States during the Cold War. These photographs were declassified in the 1990s and shown to professionals who identified the outlines of an ancient settlement. But considering how volatile the region has been, archaeologists haven't had a whole lot of time for excavating. Some recent activity was going on in 2020, but we haven't heard any news just yet. Bodies in the falls. In 1969, something grisly was discovered at the bottom of Niagara Falls. It happened when the Army Corps of Engineers diverted the water to the Canadian side of the falls for a few months as part of a project to look for erosion. There were some issues with pedestrian bridges that were probably in need of being replaced, and they wanted to do a full geological survey of the falls itself. This required them to drain the water, and that was when they discovered the bodies of an unidentified man and an unidentified woman. Nobody knew who these people were or where they came from. They could have accidentally fallen into the falls or jumped in on purpose and simply were never missed. They had also been underwater for so long that it was difficult to tell what year they'd gone missing. But besides that disturbing discovery, they also found millions of coins at the bottom of the falls. The coins were left mostly by tourists who flicked their spare change into the falls to make a wish. All the coins were removed, as well as the bodies, and whoever got to keep all that spare change probably made a pretty handsome fortune. The oldest mummy. While mummies might make you think of ancient Egypt and pharaohs, the earliest examples of artificial mummification did not come from Egypt, but the ancient Chinchorro culture that lived at the very edge of the Atacama Desert between Peru and Chile. These people lived here for around 6,000 years. They began mummifying their dead sometime around 7020 BC. They figured out how to do it naturally, using the dry and arid conditions of their desert, the driest place on Earth, to preserve their dead. It would take them around 2,000 years to begin artificially mummifying corpses. According to Guinness World Records, the earliest known Chinchorro mummy modified using artificial means is that of a child that was discovered inside the Camarones Valley and was mummified back in 5050 BC. Over the next 3,500 years, these people evolved their mummification process in some very unique ways before ultimately giving up the practice in the 1st century BC. So, how did the South American mummies differ from the Egyptian mummies? These people would remove the skin of the corpse and then take out the muscles and organs so that just the skeleton was left. They would then rebuild the corpse using wood and plants before ultimately sewing on a layer of clay skin, and then adding a layer of ash paste. They would also cover the head of the mummy with a special clay helmet. In this way, they managed to preserve much of the body using natural materials. To give you a bit of a comparison on the oldest mummies in the world, the oldest Egyptian mummy only dates back to 3000 BC. That's about 4,000 years later than the Chinchorro culture. The Veil of Veronica. The Veil of Veronica is one of the most mysterious and controversial relics ever discovered. The veil begins with a legend. A woman named Veronica took pity on Jesus Christ as he was carrying the burden of his cross through the dusty streets of Jerusalem on his way to be crucified. The story goes that she stepped out of the crowd and wiped the sweat and blood from the face of Jesus with her veil. Jesus thanked her for being so kind, and the blood and sweat the sheet wiped off left a lasting imprint of his face on her veil. The cloth became sacred, and legend has it that the veil can even heal the sick. In 1999, it was announced that the Veil of Veronica was found hidden inside of a monastery in Italy. At the time, people were surprised because they had thought the Catholic Church was holding onto the veil in the Vatican. After all, once a year, they used to bring the veil out of the Vatican and show it to everyone before putting it back in their secret vaults. The mystery here is finding out which veil is real, if either. Supposedly, the veil was taken by Emperor Tiberius after Jesus' death, then eventually passed down to Pope Clement, then down to the next pope, forever kept in the church. But Heinrich Pfeiffer, a professor at Gregorian University, says the veil in the Vatican is just a copy, and the original vanished back in 1608. It was apparently stolen and then sold to the secluded Italian monastery up in the hills, where it wasn't seen again until 1999. Of course, nobody can actually prove any of this. A new throat organ. Despite all we think we know about human anatomy, scientists literally discovered a new organ just this year completely by accident. Researchers at the Netherlands Cancer Institute were using special scanning techniques to investigate a patient and found a new set of salivary glands in the upper part of the throat that they hadn't known about before. The scientists then used the same scanning techniques to look at 100 additional patients. These new glands were found in the nasopharynx region, positioned behind the nose. Previous to the discovery, scientists thought that the region was pretty much empty, but they have now discovered what they are calling tubercle salivary glands hiding underneath a piece of cartilage. They also dissected 2 cadavers to further confirm the discovery. From what scientists can figure out so far, these newly found glands probably work to lubricate the upper throat just behind the nose and mouth. This newest discovery was published in the journal Radiotherapy and Oncology. It's kind of surprising that nobody knew this was here, right? With all the nasal issues and reconstructive surgeries and plastic surgeries, it took new technology to discover this new organ in the throat, the man cave. In Sudan, hundreds of well-preserved stone tools were discovered inside of an abandoned gold mine in the Sahara Desert. A gold rush in Sudan led miners into open-pit mines in the desert, but prehistoric hominids have already been there. Miners discovered ancient tools such as hand axes and cleavers built from simple stone. The hundreds of stone tools were made by Homo erectus and may be up to 1 million years old. Archaeologists found stone flakes all throughout the abandoned mine, suggesting it had been used as a kind of workshop. As of right now, this is the oldest site in the eastern Sahara where Stone Age tools have been found. There could have been one guy building tools for everyone in the region, sort of like the local blacksmith. He just hung out in his man cave and whittled stone axes for his friends. It's hard to give an exact picture of what was happening 1 million years ago by looking at some leftover rocks, but experts have a pretty good idea. Paleolithic artifacts used by both Homo erectus and Homo sapiens have been found in some 200 sites in the region. Homo erectus was the first hominid that began to travel the world and had a body and gait just like modern humans some 2 million years ago. The Blinking Mummy. This mummy goes back to the 1920s when Rosalia Lombardo died from pneumonia at the young age of 2. Her father reached out to an embalmer and taxidermist to preserve his dead child for eternity. Over 100 years now since her death, Rosalia still looks like a sleeping child. She can be found today resting underneath a glass case in the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo in Italy. But what's this about blinking? Some visitors to the crypt have reported Rosalia opening and closing her eyes as if blinking at them. It almost looks like she opens her eyes to see if anyone's around, then discreetly closes them and goes back to sleep. For years, nobody could understand what was going on. Some thought it was the changing temperatures inside the crypt making her eyelids move up and down. But then, in 2009, the curator of the catacombs discovered the little girl's eyes weren't quite closed all the way, and depending which way the light hit her eyes and what angle you were looking at her from, it looks like she's blinking at you. Ancient fingerprints. A mysterious set of ancient fingerprints were just found at an archaeological site in the United Arab Emirates. Dating back 3,000 years, archaeologists discovered the mysterious prints fossilized in some bricks. Located at the Hili 2 archaeological site in Abu Dhabi, and according to Abu Dhabi's Department of Culture and Tourism, the fingerprints could explain how the ancient people in the area advanced their construction techniques. Ancient craftsmen apparently used their hands to make special indentations in mud bricks that they would pour mortar into, which helped walls stay together and be stronger. These fingerprints are direct proof of these construction techniques. But mysterious fingerprints weren't the only things discovered here. This ancient site is famous for having one of the most sophisticated irrigation systems of the Old World. The system dates back to the Iron Age and is a testament to how cultures of the Arab world transitioned from hunting and gathering to a stabilized culture with more modern technology. Looks like people have loved leaving their handprints and fingerprints in mud and cement since practically the beginning of time. Viking woman's grave. The grave of a mysterious Viking woman was just discovered in Norway. It was in the Hesnøyheim municipality after archaeologists had already been digging for several weeks without finding anything. The only thing they had turned up all season were a couple of cooking pits. But that all changed when they came upon a dark layer of greasy soil, which often comes before the remains of a human body. It was a huge surprise to find the body, and even more shocking when it turned out to be the body of a Viking woman buried around 1,000 years ago. She was found inside of her own burial chamber, something very rare in ancient Norway. According to the project manager Raymond Salvage, the deceased woman was put into the wooden chamber, a lid was placed on top, and she remained undisturbed until now. Researchers also discovered a small treasure trove of valuable beads, at least 340 of them to take with her into the afterlife. Nobody is sure what the beads represent, why this woman was given such an extraordinary burial, or just who exactly she was. A creepy ghost town. When TikTok users were exploring rural Missouri, they stumbled upon one of the creepiest ghost towns in all of the United States. A girl shared her discovery of a subdivision full of creepy abandoned mansions known as the Indian Ridge Resort. This place was supposed to be a luxurious neighborhood with a building cost of around $1.6 billion. The developers were going to build a shopping mall, a golf course, a museum, and one of the largest indoor water parks in the world. But none of this stuff ever got off the ground. A few of the giant mansions were partially built, but nobody ever moved into them. Construction stopped by 2009 after the financial crisis, and the entire area has since been forgotten. Most people don't even know it's there, which made the poor TikTok user's discovery so much more horrifying for her and her friends. The mansions are now crumbling, haunting, and not very welcoming. And it doesn't help that they were built in the middle of a foggy forest. The girl was pretty scared, but she had a blast sharing it. As far as we know, there are no current plans to demolish the creepy abandoned mansions, so they should definitely be around if you want to find them on your next trip to Missouri. Xanadu. The site of Xanadu is yet another mysterious location in China, north of the Great Wall. Xanadu was the capital city of Kublai Khan, originally designed in 1256. This city is one of the only surviving examples of the attempted assimilation between the nomadic Mongolian hordes and the Chinese culture of the Han Dynasty. From this city, Kublai Khan established what would grow to be the Yuan Dynasty, subsequently ruling China for about 100 years while it extended its borders all across Asia. This city was the origin of a great religious debate that resulted in Tibetan Buddhism spreading throughout the region. Alas, Xanadu was abandoned less than 200 years after it was established. Today, you would never know such a great city rose far into the distance, as its remains are few. There is nothing but grass and a few short, stubby rock walls. It's known that the city fell into disrepair after the fall of the Yuan Dynasty. But how the Mongols managed to lose their grip on the city and what the chaos looked like in the final days of Xanadu are still a mystery. Ancient honey. In central Nigeria, archaeologists have discovered the earliest honey jars in all of Africa. Several pieces of terracotta pottery were unearthed at an excavation site dated back 3,500 years. Archaeologists found evidence the jars once contained honey, since there were trace compounds of beeswax inside of them. This is really interesting because there hasn't been proof of ancient beekeeping anywhere in Africa until now. Historians were sure the ancient tribes had done some kind of beekeeping to produce consistent honey, the oldest sweetener in the world, but they hadn't known any details about it. We now know that these pottery jars were crafted from a very early civilization known as the Nok culture, who came into power in 1500 BC. The Nok lasted around 1,500 years and were famous for their terracotta statues, some of which are still around today. Unfortunately, nobody is exactly sure how honey was used by these ancient people. They definitely used some kind of heating process to isolate the pure honey, though it's not clear if they actually used it with other foods, if they used the honey to make primitive beer, or if it was used cosmetically or as a type of ancient adhesive. Honey is very versatile, and they could have been using it for anything. 19th century shipwreck. Construction workers in Boston recently discovered the remains of a shipwreck in the Seaport district completely by accident. Who knew that construction workers find so many cool objects? The construction company, Skanska, was under no obligation to report the find, but contacted state and local officials just in case. That was nice. Joe Bagley, a local Boston archaeologist who was called to the scene, determined that the vessel was probably from the 19th century, definitely before 1880. Construction was put on hold, and Bagley and his team tried to work as quickly as possible to document the findings so the work could continue. Unfortunately, the ship proved way too huge and too fragile to be moved, but they were extremely happy to be able to document it. What they found was that the ship had run aground, and there had likely been a fire on board. Archaeologists think the ship could have been on fire as it was sinking, but how had the ship remained undetected for all those years? Those studying it believe that the ship had probably run aground. No one in the area had cared enough to take it apart, and it was eventually used to help fill in the shoreline of Boston, turning the mudflats into buildable land. It's extremely rare to find a shipwreck in an area that's been filled in, but researchers were able to get the entire blueprint of the ship. The team found barrels inside of the shipwreck that looked like they contained lime, the construction material, not the citrus, and that it may have been brought to Boston for mixing concrete and to make paper. Other than that, not much is known about what the ship had been used for. Archaeologists documented the wreck as best they could, building a 3D image of the ship. However, that hasn't helped them to discover the truth about what happened to the crew, what the rest of the cargo may have been, or what caused the ship to catch fire and crash into the shore. Archaeologist Bagley commended Skanska for understanding the significance of the wreck to the people and city of Boston, and delaying their project to allow the ship to be documented. Ancient bark shield. An absolutely astonishing find was made in England, and it is the only one of its kind anywhere in Europe. The find involves a shield made from tree bark that dates back 2,300 years. Archaeologists say the shield was crafted between 395 and 250 BC. According to Julia Farley, the curator of the British and European Iron Age collections at the British Museum, the shield is a phenomenal object and one of the most important finds that she has ever encountered. The shield was first found by archaeologists digging near the River Soar. The reason the shield is so shocking is that it's made of bark. Organic objects very rarely survive the passing of time because they simply rot away, and usually quite quickly. But because the shield was found inside of a pit filled with water, it could have somehow been preserved by the special minerals in the river. What's even more shocking is that until now, nobody had thought bark shields were really used in Europe. Everyone thought bark shields would be too flimsy for battle. But new experiments show that creating a shield out of bark and wood may have been lighter than metal and tough enough to block most attacks. It's not clear just how widely used these shields really were, seeing as this is the only one of its kind ever found, but they could have been used a lot, and it's just that all the examples have rotted away over the past 2,000 years. A lost forest. Archaeologists were recently shocked when they discovered an ancient forest completely by accident off the coast of Wales. The United Kingdom has experienced a series of strong storms, The worst was probably Storm Francis. When Francis smashed into whales, the gale force winds blew away parts of the beach, revealing an ancient forest that had been buried in the sand for roughly 4,500 years. Carbon dating placed the forest as being alive in 1500 BC, but what's really fascinating is that the ancient forest buried under the sand may have something to do with the 17th century legend of a lost civilization swallowed by the sea, known as the Sunken Hundred. The legend of the Sunken Hundred states that a once powerful kingdom occupied the land where this ancient forest once thrived, before being flooded and turned into a beach. The land was flooded because one of the princes in charge of the city forgot to close the floodgates and allowed the entire area to be swallowed by seawater. Unfortunately, there has never been any archaeological evidence to prove this Welsh version of Atlantis ever existed, but these newly found trees do suggest that the area was definitely full of greenery before some kind of geological event caused the sea levels to rise. Thanks for watching! What's the wildest discovery you've ever made by accident? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!